Hey, welcome back to 2 p.m. with the Trigger, streaming here once again. Normally to help you shine on camera and shine on stage, but today we're taking a break from the normal 2 p.m. And today we're celebrating and getting prepared to celebrate Global Ethics Day. It's coming up on October the 18th. It's just around the corner. And we're going to be getting into a live virtual event coming up on the 18th, working with the World Ethics Organization. And if you haven't heard about Global Ethics Day, let me kind of get into this a little bit. Coming up on Wednesday, October the 18th, it is Global Ethics Day, the annual event produced by the Carnegie Council of Ethics in International Affairs. The theme for the Global Ethics Day 2023 is Ethics Empowered, using the power of ethics to build a better world. But on that special day, the WEO, or the World Ethics Organization, will be holding a live virtual symposium. I will be hosting and co-hosting with my good friend, Sandra D. Robinson. And on that live symposium, the theme is going to be leadership, ethics and leadership, creating a culture of ethics for success. The live virtual event starts at 5 p.m. Eastern Time on Wednesday, the 18th. And we'll have a link that we're going to bring up in a little bit and share so you can register, join us, and be a part of it. Now, as part of all that, we are preparing with the preview interviews with different panelists that will be involved. There'll be 3 global leaders that focus on the world of ethics. And Ann Skeet is joining us here today, the Senior Director of Leadership Ethics at the Markkula Center for Applied Ethics and Santa Clara University. Her work focuses on ethical dilemmas of leaders and followers and business ethics, with a particular interest in healthy corporate culture, corporate governance, and ethical leadership practices, all grounded in the emphasis of human flourishing. Welcome, Ann Skeet, to 2 p.m. with the Trigger. Hi, Ann.
Hi, Rich. Thanks for having me.
So you've been in this ethical soup, shall we say, for how long?
I've been at the Markkula Center for 9 years.
Now, were you doing ethical type of research and speaking before that, or is that something new you dove into when you got there?
So I've been intrigued about ethics and leadership for many years. I used to be the CEO of an organization called American Leadership Forum here in Silicon Valley, and it's an interesting organization. It brings together leaders in CEO and C-suite positions from the public, private, and nonprofit sector each year, and they participate in a year-long fellowship. And so some of my interest in the work I do now comes from that experience, because I would have the opportunity in different settings to hear from leaders, to hear what was on their mind and their challenges. And in the early 2000s, there was a number of different regulatory changes. First Sarbanes-Oxley, and then later on in the decade, Dodd-Frank. And both of those really sort of ratcheted up the individual accountability of people in institutional leadership positions. So I would hear CEOs say, oh my gosh, I'm on the hook for everything people in my organization do. How do I make sure that they're behaving responsibly or good behavior? And so when I came to the Markkula Center, that was kind of the question that was in the back of my mind, which is, how does a leader make sure that people in the organization know what is expected of them and what is considered good behavior?
What a great place to be and dig into that topic. I mean, that's like bullseye right on.
Yeah, well, and certainly Silicon Valley is, a very happening place, and this sort of ground zero for a lot of creative business innovation. So I find the people that are working here in the Valley are willing to be engaged on the topic and interested, as many of them are building companies from scratch. We have a startup culture here in the Valley that's pretty strong. And so they're thinking about those issues as they start to, form a company and bring it to life.
So when I was doing your introduction, Global Ethics Day, again, people may not be aware there is such a thing. It's been going on for years and years. Over 100 different countries are involved with it now. It's amazing what's happening globally. But I use the term human flourishing. Many people probably don't know what that means. Could you break that down for us?
Sure. I mean, ethics is really just about a way of making good choices and living a good life. And so a lot of times when people hear the word ethics, I think they have kind of a bad skin reaction, and they might feel sort of instantly judged, or like that's what it's about. It's about judging in a very black and white way. But really, it is about trying to think and be intentional about the decisions you make so that you live a good life, and people define a good life in a lot of different ways. But the sense of human flourishing is that, all of us can flourish. So our vision at the Markkula Center is that we want to encourage people to make their decisions with care and concern for others.
So with that, you focus on that whole healthy corporate culture that you kind of mentioned, and you also get in the ethical leadership practices. So we are going to focus on leadership with the WEO on that day. So let's talk about that ethical leadership. Is ethical leader something that people personally have that drives this, or is it something they're trained and learned about? How do we do better with these practices that you talk about?
Yeah, so the practice of ethical leadership, first of all, I talk about it as a practice because I think it's more useful for people than saying, here's an ethical leader or here's an unethical leader. In
Ah,
reality, it's a combination of sort of how we show up in the world, our own personal character, and then the actions that we take. And I think that there are things that leaders can do to encourage, and provide ethical leadership in their organization. But it's really that combination. So I draw it sort of as a stack, kind of. The foundation is your core character,
mhm.
and how people interact with you in the world, and that's the beginning of the impact that you can have as a leader. But then there are things you can do that you stack on top of it. So you can create community. One of the things that we've learned in our research is that conscious creation of community is one of the things that contributes to healthy corporate culture, and that sort of having that sense of mutual support. You can just, explicitly encourage ethical conduct, and you see a lot of that in companies with their codes of ethics and things like that. But you can just be very explicit about what your expectations are.
Well,
So
that's a
those
big. Oh,
two of
sorry
the
about that.
first, those are two of the first kinds of activities, and then there's a few others after that.
Well, and that whole community side is big for the World Ethics Organization. They want to help build that global community where the ethics is. We got to find a way to unify it because we all have our different traditions, our different beliefs, our different political structures. There's enough that separates us, but the goal is to overlap in a way that ethically we can relate, communicate, and get along as a global community. Correct?
Yeah, and I think there's a number of organizations that try and do that, or sort of are in search of that global ethic, if you will. Is there a set of beliefs that we can identify that humanity holds in common? And that's challenging given all the different cultural differences around the world and the perspectives that people come from. But there are some commonalities in approaches, and I think if we focus on the things we have in common, it's far more likely that we can find that connection.
Well, again, we're talking global. Well, let's step back and do a little microcosm because you work with helping organizations make ethics more pervasive all the way through it. So let's talk about that. How do you transform that, a structure, an organization on a micro level before we go international?
Right. Well, one of the things that we've learned in the research we've done is that there are certain conditions in companies that make it more likely for ethics to get used. So, if a company invests a lot in their ethical foundation, their codes of conduct, and they are explicit about their practices, still things can kind of go wrong. And then there's a need to sort of clarify culture. And that's one of the other actions, the other practices of ethical leadership is doing that when things have sort of gone off the rails. But the conditions that you can check for in an organization are these three. First, that there is a sense of responsibility to society, that a company is actually talking about and sees themselves as in partnership with the broader society and the communities in which they have an impact, and that they in turn are impacted by those communities. The second condition is this idea of having a climate of mutual trust and understanding. And what that looks like is decentralized decision making in the organization and a certain comfort level that people feel like they can bring forward concerns and issues that they have. And the last is this idea of having a set of ethical deliberation practices. So it's actually important about how you make decisions. And those the sort of best practices in ethical decision making are using data to make sure that you're, arriving at your decision, that you're including the stakeholders, the people who are going to be impacted by the decision, that you're thinking about kind of the downstream effects of the decisions that you're making, and that after you've made your decision, to the degree that it's possible, that you share the thinking behind your decision, like, and the motivations for it.
So that's within an organization. So you do have a blueprint. You do have a roadmap to help them literally disassemble, reassemble, and implement, right?
Yeah, at the Markkula Center, we're an applied ethics center. So that means we're trying to take theory and actually help professionals make decisions in their organizations. And so we do that. I happen to do it in the area of leadership and business ethics, but I have colleagues who work in journalism ethics, government ethics, bioethics, technology ethics specifically, and internet ethics. And so those are all areas where you need to be thinking about how do you actually apply it to the decisions that you're making.
Well, coming up on October 15th or 18th, sorry, 18th, we're going to get into this with the WEO. We're about leadership, but you just touched on, you're from Silicon Valley right now. You touched on technology briefly. We are going to get into leadership, but let's sidestep for a second real briefly, because AI technology is all the buzz right now. And I've done a couple of pieces on ethics and broadcasting and media. So what's ethics and technology look like today? Because it's Pandora's box.
Yeah, well, it is Pandora's box. I mean, that's a great analogy in terms of, as people are creating technologies, they need to think about what they're unleashing, and as they lift the lid of the box, what might be coming out, and so that's that consideration of downstream effects, that best practice of ethical deliberation. And again, we try and provide tools and resources at the center so that people can be more intentional about how they're bringing technology online. One of the ways people talk about that is to talk about responsible technology development, or responsible AI. And so what does it mean to be responsible? And we recently, I co-authored a book with another colleague from the center and another colleague from a different university. And we worked on sort of laying out a roadmap for people to think about how to develop technology ethically in their organizations.
So bridge the gap. Can you have ethical technology without ethical leadership driving and leading that? Do the two integrate as much as I think they do?
Of course they do. It sounds like maybe you've read the book, but the very first stage of the roadmap that we lay out is around leadership discernment and commitment to developing responsible AI. So the leadership team really has to say, this is going to be a strategic initiative in our organization. We're going to commit the resources, and we're going to make this a priority, that we're developing technology in this way. And that can look like a lot of different things. It can involve developing some principles in the organization to make decisions with, but it also includes having a dedicated leader, someone who is going to step forward and take responsibility for the responsible technology efforts in their company.
So I just saw this. More organizations are coming up with like the healthy leader, the playful leader, the one that gets you out and be active. Do organizations need to have a ethical leader that's like the champion that remind you of Global Ethics Day and things like that? Is there such a thing as that appointed leader to keep spurring it on?
Yeah, I think most organizations now have ethics and compliance officers. And so one of the things that we, encourage is that really is an ethics and compliance officer. Some organizations, it tends to be just about compliance, sort of making sure that all the rules and regulations are being followed. But that ethical piece is a little bit, it's different than compliance.
Yeah.
It actually is about how decisions are made in the organization, and about guiding people to be consistent with the organization's mission and values. And so, I do think it helps when there's someone who has that as their dedicated responsibility. But I also think it helps when that person sees part of their function is making it, distributed throughout the organization. That's that pervasiveness. You really want it to be just baked in and embedded in what happens in the organization organically.
It's got to be part of the DNA. And that's kind of the goal of the WEO and what they're going to be doing. And again, coming up on the 18th, we're going to be live. And Ann Skeet, who's with me right now, is just one of three total panelists that we're going to be getting deeper and deeper into. This is just a teaser for everybody right now. And you've done well with that, Ann. But everyone needs to hit the QR code. You need to register. This will be a Zoom event, interactive. We'll take your questions. We're going to have an hour-long discussion. And as we kind of wind down here today, what's your hope for Global Ethics Day 2023? What would you like to see happen this year as there's different organizations like the WEO doing events like this?
Yeah, I think I'd like to see people reflect on how they make their decisions and be a little more thoughtful about making decisions with others in mind. Sort of a less selfish perspective and a more other orientation to people. I do think it helps us to make the kinds of decisions that allow all of us to have that good life, that human flourishing. That's really what we're hoping for.
Ann Skeet, thanks for being with us here today at 2 p.m. live. And again, don't forget, we will be having her come on back next week live with us at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. Thank you, Ann, for being here.
Thanks for having me, Rich.
So you hit the QR code. You want to come and join us. This is going to be an amazing live event. And again, we're bringing the world's best. We're going around the globe and getting people to speak, share, and talk about leadership ethics. It's going to be a very timely, topical discussion. Hit the QR code. And please come and join us next Wednesday, the 18th. And that's going to do it for the special edition of 2 p.m. with the Trigger. We'll be back here tomorrow with another discussion. And we are going to talk more about Global Ethics Day once again on Friday. So be with us tomorrow for 2 p.m. live with the Trigger.